Guys, we made it. No more international breaks until March. Congratulations, everybody. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name's Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friends, Adam and Andrea. Going to start with Adam. How we doing, man? I might have picked the wrong person. I'm going to start with Andrea. How you doing, man?
Good, thank you. Like you said, club football's back this weekend. I cannot wait. International break was too long, even though it was like a week, but long enough. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, I can't wait for the domestic football to return. Honestly, this weekend was a bit lost. Thankfully, we still had the mighty Crew Alexandra play and win, so there was something for me to watch. But yeah, it did feel a bit desolate once that game finished. Adam, how we doing, man?
Yeah, keeping very well, thank you. As Andrea alluded to, glad that the club fixtures are back in full flow. And yeah, even though we kind of say that, there's been plenty of stories in the internationals to keep us preoccupied and spreading the love to our listeners.
Well, fingers crossed. Let's see what we can. Let's see how much we can wring out of an hour here, because let's see what we've got. We are, of course, going to talk about England versus Ireland. Some people enjoyed that, I heard. We'll be talking about Italy against France. That was a fascinating one. I don't think the scoreline fully reflected the performances, but plenty to talk about in that game. We'll be taking a very quick look around other international games and headlines that caught our eye before, in the second part of the show, we go to some listeners' and viewers' questions in anticipation of the return of the Premier League and Serie A, with some new managers arriving, some old and new managers arriving, and how we think this will be affecting the season as we head into the busy Christmas period. So, guys, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk all things international football. And here we are. We are back. It's time to talk about the final matches in this Nations League campaign, I think, apart from the playoffs. But that's so far away. Don't worry about it. And we're going to start with England 5, Ireland 0. The first half I was enjoying. I think I was the only person in the world who was enjoying it because it was absolutely terrible for anybody to watch. But at least it was 0-0. Adam, the definition of a game of two halves here. Is it worth talking about the first half? Let's talk about it a little bit. How did you see it? What did you think?
Yeah, it was very much what you would expect from Ireland, I suppose, to put men behind the ball and not concede too early on. And they did quite good to a point. I thought they were too deep for my liking. I thought that would have an impact in terms of stamina for the rest of the game. And also I was expecting a bit more fight potentially in the midfield. As I alluded to you offline, I felt, as much as you can carry and practice these kind of tactics out, it never works out too well if you haven't got some willing runners at the same time. And although there was some threats from the likes of Feste Evesuele as well as Sami Smojic on occasions, it was pretty much all England. But England did struggle to kind of really create any clear-cut opportunities, it's fair to say. There was a few runs into the box that kind of came off as corners in the end. But again, England really did struggle against that kind of line that Ireland deployed. And yeah, they did quite well, I think, up until that point. I think, obviously, we'll allude to it, but in the second half, when the sending off does happen for a second bookable offence, I think the first instance where Liam Scales gets that first yellow card, I think that was avoidable, personally. I didn't think he needed to do what he did. I understand why he would do it. But I think in the grand scheme of things, when you think about how Ireland did play for the rest of that game, it was very evident that they needed 11 players on the pitch, and they struggled. So, yeah, to their credit, Ireland did quite well, but it did kind of come across as there was a lack of maybe a slight bit of ambition, but also maybe tactics in terms of how they were going to kind of carry it out for the rest of the game. But look, I think once you're down to 10 men, it's always going to be very difficult. But yeah, up until that point, Rory, Ireland weren't doing too badly. And probably there's an argument to say England were just being England again and struggling to break down defences.
Well, we do have to say it wasn't a first-choice England team, right? There's a lot of players missing, a lot of players that kind of withdrawn from this international break, obviously. But I think the Ireland manager keeps coming out after games and being like, yeah, it was a little bit too negative. It was a little bit too negative. It's like, yeah, mate, you're the one in charge of this. Like, it's not this like passive thing that happens to be happening. It's like, this is how you're, because even in the Finland game, we won, which was fantastic. But afterwards, he was like, yeah, that was quite negative. We'd like to be a bit more positive. The only thing I would say in defense of this is that I'm certain we should have had a penalty. Like, I can't believe we weren't given a penalty for the Mark Gahey on Ferguson. Like, that is a stonewall penalty, no matter what angle you look at it. I know that's the one time, basically, Ireland got into the box. But if I look back at other famous Irish wins, we kind of scored a goal and then scummed it for 90 minutes and got to the end, right? And you think, if that goal goes in, or if we get a penalty, it changes the whole complexion of the game. It changes the whole, like, how Ireland approach in the second half. I think it's a big turning point in that game. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because it's the fucking Nations League. The gap in quality between the teams was always there. The chances are England would have come back and won 3-4-1 anyway. But it changes the complexion of the game completely. And maybe Irish fans look back on that game afterwards now and are like, okay, well, you know, we did defend well, but we did catch them on the break. We did create chances. So I think that big moment, that big decision did make a huge difference in the result ultimately, or the kind of the harshness of the result when you look at it now. But I'm glad you mentioned Eboseli and Smodic, because they're the two players from the recent international breaks where I'm like, it blows my mind that Doherty was still getting a wing-back role up until a couple of weeks ago when you look at Eboseli and you're like, this guy, like, unbelievable again. There was a point where he tried to dribble past the whole England team and kind of, if there was anyone there to help him, he could have actually done something with it. But like, he's standing so shoulders above everybody else at the moment. So there was two decent sparks there. But Andrea, it was a weakened England team. Do you think any of the players kind of put their name into the hat? Maybe Madueke, Gordon, like there's a few, it was a good opportunity for players to get themselves involved, right?
Yeah, I would actually say Curtis Jones. I was quite impressed with him, actually. And I think he offers something different in our midfield. He's a bit more dynamic. Players don't really use in midfield. They're quite, it's quite simplified with Rice in there. So someone like that can be like that box to box energy in that midfield. Because as well, they were talking about before about possibly moving Bellingham back. Maybe someone like Jones could allow Bellingham to go forward, stay forward now a bit more in the attacking role. So I thought he was quite exciting to see. I don't know whether Tuchel will stick with him because Tuchel likes to kind of keep a core structure of like a Rice or someone. So I don't know how long that would last. But he's certainly impressed. I think players like Gordon, Madueke, I think they'll be in and around it. They played well, but it will still be a big ask to kind of be in the squad, continuing going into Tuchel's reign. But there were a few candidates. I think Lewis Hall as well looks good. Like there's these players, but there's so much quality. It's quite hard to get a nailed on spot. So I guess that can work in these guys' favours. But they didn't do any harm to their reputation. So Tuchel's got a lot of. I think Carsley's definitely left Tuchel with a lot of thinking to do because he's literally got lots of players playing and saying, look, here's the massive group. There's still more to come, but choose from this. And then, he's got to decide. But I think as a manager, you can't complain about that. You want talent, you've got it. You've got depth as well. So it's just your job now to kind of pick out which ones are the top ones. But certainly they will still be around it. But interesting to see if he keeps these type of players going into the first squad, whether he will take a gamble or will he just play it safe with the normal people we see in the team.
I think it'll be interesting with Tuchel, you're right, because he's not going to have much rope. Like, if there is one bad result because of the horrendous aspects of our press, if there is one bad result, they will jump on him and they will be begging for him to be fired pretty quickly. So I think he's not going to be afforded much patience or the opportunity to take risks. So I think it's really great that Lee Carsley has done this and been like you said, look at all the talent you have, look at all the wealth of talent that is here. But I think Thomas Tuchel's literally just got to go, right, best 23 players and just like throw them in and be like, right, then we can figure it out from there. But Adam, let's talk about Lee Carsley then, I suppose, because it is great that he has given so many opportunities to these players and players that wouldn't have previously been considered, like Angel Gomez. No one really I said when he called up, I had to Google who he was. I kind of vaguely remember that he was at Manchester United, but that was it. Like, do you think this will be the legacy of Carsley now, that he did offer so many caps and kind of put a spotlight on players that maybe people weren't aware of or weren't as aware of as they should have been?
Certainly, I think that's one aspect of it, by giving these kind of maybe unconventional, less established players an opportunity in the squad. I think that's definitely one of them. What I think also, and it's maybe not drawn upon right now, but potentially going forward, is the fact that there was a different kind of fluidity to the team, like in terms of the way that they played. You know, in certain games, they actually, especially away from home, they seem to play a lot more with spirit and like attacking nous about their game. Now, I appreciate the opponents who England faced weren't necessarily like world beaters, you know, in that respect. And I think obviously against higher opposition, maybe England would find it a slightly bit different in terms of the game and the way that it would approach it. But certainly I think a lot of credit to Lee Carsley for having, I suppose, that approach with this group of players. Yes, he is blessed with that group of players, but I think he's already alluded to the fact that he wasn't necessarily comfortable with the position. He didn't know how to approach it, and he needed to rely on a lot of established coach members, including, you know, older pros in the likes of Ashley Cole, for example. I saw Julian Lescott being involved in this kind of setup as well. So I think that goes to show his credentials as a coach, certainly, and I think that's going to help him in the future. I think this experience will be massive for his career as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of elements to it. I think the fact that he wasn't scared as well to kind of ditch certain players and play these kind of lesser or unconventional players is a lot of credit to Lee Carsley, and he certainly, I think, helped erase maybe some of the sentiments that were kind of alluded to in the summer with Gareth Southgate, you know, being too pragmatic potentially and being boring at the same time. I didn't feel at any point, even with that defeat against Greece, did you find it being boring at any stage? I think it was far from it. So a lot of credit to Lee Carsley, but whether that gets written, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of tool they've used as transition, right? And kind of maybe now Tuchel can step in and be like, okay, let's lean into this attacking talent. Let's lean in. The players have got a bit more accustomed to like not being so defensively focused or whatever. I think it is a really interesting. Obviously, only time will tell if the FA have played this right. I personally don't mind that they've made it, that he's waiting until January. I think it kind of made sense for Carsley to just see this out, and then Tuchel can come in at it freshly, and I think that kind of made sense. But yeah, overall positive for England. I think the only thing is obviously being in League B, and I think we talked about it before, it afforded Carsley the opportunity to play some of these players and to play these risks. Now, being in Group A, when you're going to come up against Italy, Portugal, Spain, Germany, France, you can't really do that so much. So I feel like this was the one opportunity that England had also to do this. And now next year, there won't be that opportunity, unfortunately. But let's talk about some of the goals, I suppose. I obviously was kind of watching via my phone as I kind of quickly lost interest. But there were some big moments. Anthony Gordon got his first goal for England. Jared Bowen got his first goal for England. Harwood Bellis got his first goal for England. I did like Roy Keane's comments afterwards when they asked him about it. And he was like, it's not all done and dusted yet. Like, he's not married her yet. So that can still change. I did like those comments. But Andrea, from those first goal scorers, were there any of the goals that you particularly liked? I thought Bowen's was very well taken.
Yeah, they were all good. They were good goals, to be honest. Yeah, I'd say Bowen was the standout one, and someone like him who hasn't given the opportunity as much in the England shirt. When I think he's a really good player. So it's nice to see him go on there and score. Yeah, I'd probably have to say Bowen, but pretty much the goals were pretty good goals. I mean, with 10 men, it ran right at that point. But yeah, at least it was an opportunity to get on the score sheet. That's the important thing. I think you have to look at the positive of that. Even though it was a red card and it was an easy win, you got players scoring who haven't really scored much, haven't played much. So that's the most important thing.
No, absolutely. And the players, like, as much as I was like, okay, please stop now. Like, it's from an England point of view, it's very good that they were just like, right, let's just like foot down, batter them, and then like really, my personal emotions don't matter there. But like, yeah, if I look at it from an England point of view about it's good that they just absolutely killed the game off and went to town. But Adam, yeah, it kind of feels weird that it amazed me that was Bowen's first England goal because he's come on and made impacts for England. It kind of feels like he'd scored before, right?
Maybe you've been watching different games. Maybe you're getting hazy kind of looks with West Ham. I don't know.
I
but
feel
certainly,
like in the Euros he came on a few times and made a difference, didn't he? I feel like
he came on and made
times.
an impression, definitely. Maybe not in the goal front, though. I never saw him in the goal front. And I think, to Andrea's point, that's a really well-worked move. It was really clever, well manipulated. Obviously, I don't think necessarily he thought it would come off in that respect. I think little motions of the Ireland defenders going in different directions helped it go in that goal. But a lot of credit for what seems like a works out routine, that's for sure. And you could see they were trying different ways of kind of toying with the Irish defence in that respect. So a lot of credit for the way they did it. But to Andre's point, glad that he had the opportunity as well, because I think at that point, Carsley saw that this was an opportunity for the lesser-known players to maybe get some game time and maybe give them an opportunity in Thomas Tuchel's squad in the future.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I only lost my temper once at Harry Kane when he nearly got in a fight with, what was his name? It was 6 of one and a half dozen the other, but I was like, it really didn't take much for me to remember that I don't like Harry Kane. But we're going to leave that game there. Complete shit show for Ireland, but fantastic win for England. And let's go to the evening game, which was Italy 1, France 3 at the San Siro. Andrea, my initial thoughts for this one are, it didn't feel like a 3-1 win from France. I don't feel like they were that much better than Italy. Like, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think, obviously, it's a bit concerning to give away goals from set pieces in that manner, which I think Italy are quite normally strong at as well. They're really good at it.
It must be Vicario. That's all I'm saying. It must be Vicario, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to win a game, you can't play a Tottenham player. That's but to be honest, it's not the same feeling when you have Donnarumma. When you have Donnarumma, you feel safe. You feel like you can hold. You can your goal's kind of guarded well. But with Vicario, I think coming for crosses, I feel like he should have came for that cross. Yeah, the first goal in particular. So, and that is a weak part of his game. He's a great shot stopper, but he lacks that kind of authority, kind of like Donnarumma does when he comes to the ball as well from the box. So, I think that was a shame. I think the only thing I'd say, the main talking points for me with what went wrong was not starting Ravella again. I thought Ravella had a terrific game against Belgium and really dictated that game. And I feel like we missed that kind of player in that midfield to dictate it from the start, kind of enforce the kind of midfield and dictate the game and the stronghold in the game that you're going to dominate this game and the possession. Because when he came on in the second half, you could start to see that we had the ball a bit more. He was creating and stuff. But Locatelli, I don't know what's happened to him. Allegri's ruined him. He was unbelievable player, Sassuolo. I can't believe these are the same players. And he was playing in kind of that role. So I think that's kind of, I didn't understand. And the other thing I still don't understand is why Frattesi's playing a lot deeper when he's been such a goal threat for Italy in the last, year or two. It baffles me that he was not up there with Retegui, trying to catch on to crosses in the box, being that second kind of striker per se. And that kind of confused me as well. But all in all, it was just very flat. And I guess that it was a bit concerning because I think it's the final third where this kind of the system, the layout of it, didn't really allow to create chances. That's why I feel like it was quite flat-footed at times, and then in the end they were just relying on the wing backs. Cambiasso played well, to be fair, and DeMarco did at times. So there were some positives, but I don't look at that game thinking it's a worry. I only think it's one of those games where it's just one of those nights, I guess. But at the same time, we really need to kind of install some sort of player roles a bit more identified, because I feel like Ravella, a player like that, needs to be in that team. I think that's why he picked Fagioli before, even though he wasn't playing, because Fagioli does that as well. But when you've got someone in form like Rovella, Lazio has been incredible. You know, he should be in the team. Like, I think again, picking players that like Pizzilli never came on, never like why is he there? Like, you've got to look at that as well. I think there's a bit of question marks on selection. Like you're 2-1 down and you're bringing on Maldini. Like, yeah, it's a nice omen that he came on Milan, but what's Maldini really going to do at that level? He's not ready yet. Hopefully, he might be. You never know, but he's not. So I think there's still some question marks on selections and kind of the way the players are, the roles in the selection. But yeah, there's some thoughts to it. But at the same time, I'd agree with you. It wasn't a 3-1. It wasn't like they got outplayed or anything either. So it's a bit. That's what makes it more frustrating that it's a defeat like that. But
yeah, I feel like, well, look, the France midfield completely outran the Italian midfield. I couldn't see any form of control within that Italian midfield. And I think it's every time I watch them, and we've been talking about, have they got the attack figured out? And then like Retegui's on fire, and you're like, okay, have they got the defense sorted out? The defense is looking good. And now what stood out to me was the midfield. And I just thought at no point did they have control over that game. And like, who is the player that's going to get in that midfield, win the ball, and dominate the midfield for Italy? And I can't really I don't feel like there's that player at the moment for Italy. I don't feel like the closest, and he's absolutely terrible, is Cristante. And but he's the closest of that kind of, who's going to protect the back line, who's going to grab the ball and just 5-yard passes, but win the ball back and get through. I don't feel like Italy necessarily have that player right now. And I feel like that's so crucial. And then, as you were alluded to, Andrea, with Fratesi playing deeper, but then he had Barella further up front. And I feel like you just switch those round and it makes much more sense to me. So I think that midfield, he's still clearly trying to figure out what the hell is going on there. But Adam, is there any player that you think ball-winning midfielder for Italy who can get in and just give it a bit of bite? Because I can't see anyone there right now. Like we said, Locatelli isn't that guy. I can't see that successor there.
No one kind of strikes to mind as someone that does that kind of role. Bresciani, perhaps from Atalanta, who's currently on loan from Frosinone. I don't know if he's that type of player. He's more of a sideways passing kind of player. I don't necessarily see him as maybe someone that breaks it up. Maybe Bove, perhaps, who's currently with Fiorentina.
I was about to say,
but no one kind of naturally springs to mind. I can't think of anyone within that under 21 setup either necessarily that kind of can maybe be molded into that role, so to speak. But I think there's more question marks about the tactics that Spalletti deployed in that match, particularly. I think there was. I don't really get where he was trying to go with it. I know he's kind of trying to force certain styles of play at the moment, but it didn't feel fluid. It didn't seem comfortable with the players. As you alluded to, certain players didn't seem to be in their natural positions. I think Moise Kean, for example, when he came on, added a lot more energy than Retegui. And he's probably someone that probably suits what Spalletti was trying to achieve from the kickoff, personally, because maybe he's used to not having necessarily the service and more the chaser, so to speak, to create opportunities for others. So perhaps it's the personnel that it didn't work in this equation. But yeah, for someone like Retegui, you have to create opportunities. I don't see him as and this is not to kind of say he's not hardworking. It's just it's not within his nature to kind of harass the defenders and force an error. I think he's more Fox in the box kind of style of striker, and he's trying to learn his dimension with Gasperini. So I think I don't really get what he was trying to achieve. Someone that I would have loved to have seen called up is Lorenzo Luca. I think he could have been a perfect foil for a number 10 to then sit behind and create a lot more. So yeah, I'm saying this as if I'm Spalletti's level, but look, I just see it that way. I feel that's probably a missed opportunity. What I will say, though, is from a French perspective, my appreciation for Kone just grows every time I see him. What he does for Roma, obviously, is incredible. You've called it out so many times on this podcast, but what we saw in that particular match was mesmeric. It was really good, really fascinating. I think France, that was an interesting France that I hadn't seen in a while. You know, this was the exciting France that I was expecting at the Euros, for example, and it just never transitioned. A lot
That
of credit
midfield
to
is
yeah, go on.
wild. Like, I didn't think it would be a start in midfield for France.
No.
Guendouzi, Kone, and Rabiot, I genuinely didn't think
Yeah.
would be like, coming up and winning in the San Siro. But obviously, Guendouzi's doing very well at Lazio. Kone, me and Andrea have both been saying, at Roma, for anyone to come out of this season so far with any credit is a miracle, and he's coming out of it with credit.
Yeah.
And then it had to be fucking Rabiot who got 2 goals, right? Like, when the first one went in, I was like, okay, this isn't funny. And the second one, I was like, at least there will be Juve fans sat at home who are even more annoyed than me right now, if you know what I mean. That will be like, fucking hell. How has he done 2? But he did manage to find himself 2 unmarked headers. It was not particularly fantastic defending. Like, Andrea, do you think it was... Like, I know I was kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, Vicario's never going to beat these set-piece accusations. But do you think like those kind of things do lead back to it being a different goalkeeper? The back line don't know where to line up. They're not quite so sure of themselves, or is it just a lack of concentration?
I think you can't entirely put it on Vicario, but I do feel like it does play a part at the same time. Like, I feel like, the goalkeepers are the ones that they can see visually, where everyone is, who's free, who to mark up. They play a vital role in command in that area. So I feel like that was lacking. But I also think as well, kind of the trying to pressure to actually clear the line, so to actually try and fight for the ball. Like, it was very flat. I think everyone was flat-footed, and the goals just happened really easily, which was quite frustrating. So I think the defense has to take a look at it as well. Like, they didn't feel like they wanted to win that ball, and that's unbelievable. And I think that's what's also caused these goals to simply happen, because at the end of the day, these were 2 routine goals. It wasn't like it was a great delivery. It was a very simple delivery, and they caught out twice by the same player. Like, again, if you concede 1 goal with 1 player, surely your mind straight away should be like, right, he can't get another one. We've got to stop him. We've got to maybe approach it differently, put another guy on him. But to have it twice is at that level is quite unacceptable, I think. So that is a big kind of question mark. So again, that's something defense has to look at as well. But yeah, I do agree as well that the goalkeeper situation doesn't help. But then in this type of goalkeeping, I think, Adam was saying it as well. We were saying it before that, like, I would love to see Karnaseki in goal. I feel like if Donnarumma's not there, I'd like to see Karnaseki. He's at. You got to think at the end of the day, he's at one of the best teams in Italy, challenging for the title, playing day in day out. Like, he should be in there, and it would have been a bit more exciting to see him in goal. And I think, I'm not saying it would have been a different outcome, but I just think, again, like, Vicario struggled this season as well. On the back of end of last season is where he was struggling. And I have worry for him that he's falling into the trap of being a great shot stopper, but that's it. And a lot of goalkeepers do end up like that. And at that level, you can't just be that. You need to be more than that. And that would be my question mark over him.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. There's no doubt in his ability as like a goalkeeper. Yeah, shot stopping, stuff like that. But his the command of his area just isn't quite there. And I feel like he is still. He's not like big. He's not, and it just sounds super simple, but he's just not a big guy. And you're like, when you're used to Donnarumma, who's like 7'8", like maybe it does make a big difference. I don't know. And I say this, I know, as an Arsenal fan who's quite happy to jump in on the Vicario can't do set pieces kind of agenda, but I do feel like it made a bit of a difference. But like, ultimately, a result that Italy will be disappointed by, but they can move past. I did quickly want to just say, though, very predictably in the Spalletti system, both the wing-backs were the best players on the pitch. DiMarco and Cambiasso were both incredible. And, like, Cambiasso this season, Adam, before we finish here, like, he's having a real breakout season now, and he feels like he was by far Italy's best player last night, right?
Yeah, hands down, he was one of the most exciting players on the pitch for an Italy perspective. I was always impressed by the time he was at Genoa, and this was the side that was getting relegated out of the league at the time, and there was signs there that he was going to be a quality player. And then obviously he got that loan move prior to being established at Juventus, and And yeah, he just really excelled. He's really pushed himself in terms of wanting to be there. By all accounts, he's a fan of Juventus as a kid as well. And that story as well, because he's come from the really low kind of regions in terms of like footballing ability and got himself propelled to this kind of position. So fantastic kind of attitude from that point of view to get himself into a position where he's now an established player for Juventus, but also in the national squad. A lot of credit. And the fact that he's adaptable to both wings is just incredible agility from an Italy perspective as well. So it means if DeMarco's having a bad game and we haven't got a dodgy, then you can put Cambiasso into that position as well. So yeah, great opportunities for Italy to explore in the future, that's for sure. But he can play practically anywhere in that midfield, it seems.
Nice. Well, before we leave our international wrap up, we did have a question. I'm looking at a picture of the question. We had a question from friend of the show, Chuck Davey, always coming in with the Scotland perspective. And Adam, I'm going to throw over to you for this one. Is Ben Doak the best right winger in the Premier League? All I saw that he had a very, very impressive performance midweek. Tell us how excited should we be? What's going on?
Yeah, he's definitely an exciting player. I think it's very optimistic of Chuck to kind of say he's the best right kind of sided player in the Premier
Not
League
when the
right
Saka
now.
About, right? It's not fair.
Yeah,
when the Saka
I mean
about.
That's a bit unfair on Saka, isn't it? He'll just go right back, won't he, Saka? As inevitably he's always kind of forced into. Right? He'll be fine. But yeah, there's fantastic potential with Ben Doak. Obviously, he's got a loan spell at the moment with Middlesbrough. I was fortunate enough to see him the previous weekend before the international breaks, where they tore apart Luton Town. And on that occasion, he had 2 assists in that game. Really a advanced player for his age is what I would describe him as. He tore one out of Josip Gvardiol in the Nations League as well, in that win for Scotland. So that's probably the angle that Charles is on about. But he's a player that can come into the middle of the park. He's someone that can stay on the wing. He's got terrific pace, trickery, and he's got an appetite for going for goal as well. So I think he's got all the attributes. My question mark is whether, Arne Slot would deploy him in such a position. I think the opportunity at Middlesbrough has arisen because there wasn't maybe necessarily an opportunity at Liverpool. So it's going to be interesting to see what the approach is going forward after this loan spell at Middlesbrough. So this is definitely the great place for him to be in, where he's playing regular football, and he's proved it now for Scotland that he can be a threat. So I think that's promising signs that we've got a player that could, in the next few years, potentially be even better. I think that's the potential of this player. It's all down to the opportunity for me, Rory. And I'm wondering whether Liverpool will allow him, if they don't see him as part of the initial future, whether they'll allow him to go on a loan spell at another Premier League side just to get that kind of experience. Hopefully they do, if they don't see him initially in the plans. But given his form for Nation as well as for Middlesbrough, I think there's no reason why Liverpool don't look at evolving their squad and potentially having him as part of the overall squad going forward.
Very nice. Good. But well, another player to keep an eye out on, and another exciting young player for Liverpool fans to get excited about. Not only Conor Bradley, but now Ben Doak as well. Lots of good times down at Anfield. But were there any other stories that caught our eye over the international break? I wanted to very quickly say, in the African qualifying for AFCON, we were talking about Ghana having another horrendous qualifying campaign. They aren't going to make it to the last AFCON. They finished last in their group. But Sudan qualified today, despite the awful civil wars and everything going on in that country. They have qualified for their next AFCON. So a nice story happening there. This tournament consistently brings these kind of heartwarming stories, and it's nice to see another one that we can keep an eye on when AFCON rolls around again, which I'm sure we all can't wait for, a tournament very close to this pod's heart. Adam, were there any other stories that caught your eye across the international break?
Well, apart from the embarrassing kind of 5-1 defeat at the hands of Portugal for my beloved Poland, and the fast that was a bit of a circus there because I don't think it was well known, Rory, but I will spread the word of this story. Karol Swiderski was part of the Poland's national team squad for that particular game. He was about to come on in approximately the 72nd minute, only to find out that from the fourth official that he wasn't registered to actually be in the squad. Subsequently, he had to not only disperse from the actual subs bench, he had to go out of the stadium because he wasn't named. It was a clear administrative error on the part of the Polish team. Yeah, the guy had to face up to a conference at the end of the match to explain what had happened. And you can imagine how red-faced he was, having to explain to these journalists what actually happened. So, yeah, it was bad enough that there was a 5-1 defeat. But, yeah, there's been a lot being made of that situation, showing how farcical the Polish national team is at the moment. And that's, beyond the kind of performance right now. Obviously, potentially facing relegation out of the Group A piece at the moment. They're drawing 1-1 to Scotland right now through a fantastic equaliser by Kamil Pietkowski, which I would recommend everyone to watch, because I was just celebrating during our kind of talk of England, and you probably will see a clip of me going absolutely schizo. Let's put it that way. It was an absolute blaster. That's what I'm going to say.
I did see your face react to something. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to reference it. I should have referenced it.
But otherwise, we have to kind of call out the Romania-Kosovo match, Rory. So I don't know if you want to call out the tweet, but that was absolutely crazy. For those that don't know, there has been some historical beef between the two. Last season, there was a clash where they had to essentially suspend the match after 50 minutes because Kosovans had accused the Romanians of basically calling them Serbia. On this occasion, it was into injury time, 0-0. And again, the Kosovans accused the Romanians of calling them Serbians. But yeah, Balkans football, Rory, it's fair to say, is a bit crazy.
It is a situation I try to avoid talking about, but let's do it. No, I think, look, it's super, super complicated, but it was a very, very lively weekend, right? So we had Romania fans called Kosovo Serbia. Kosovan players showed the middle finger to Romanian fans. Some Romanian, 3 Serbians were arrested in Romania. Some Serbians tried to burn an Albanian flag. Serbian fans called for the murder of a Croatian and an Albanian. A Czech fan called Kosovo Albania. And then some Albanians burned a Czech flag in response. This is all the things like, when UEFA spend a very long time trying to figure out who can play who and, don't put, Northern Ireland against whoever, or don't put, and then none of it matters because they'll somehow find a way to piss each other off, right? But Andre, is this something that UEFA need to stamp out and try and do something about? Because these are becoming like regular occurrences now of these kind of, it's racist. It's racist kind of rhetoric. Like UEFA need to do more on it, right?
Yeah, definitely. They always campaign about, stopping racism and like all these messages, but there's no practical work done in these type of scenarios, clearly, because they keep happening, and to get to this extent is quite horrific, to be honest, and it's not nice for either party. So yes, they need to definitely step up and look at this as a big prime example of like the extent of how far it can go, and it could get even worse, and that's even the worry as well. So yeah, definitely they need to step up and find some practical ways to stop this from happening in future rounds. It's because, like you said, you can put certain fixtures off that they can't play certain. You can close behind doors games, but it doesn't really do anything. That just kind of covers the cracks, and yeah, it's just going to become a bigger issue. So yeah, they need to stamp down and look at all these things in a bigger perspective for the greater football as well.
Yeah, it's very much like vanity, isn't it? Rather than actually dealing with the societal issues, which is how everybody deals with it, I suppose. But before we do an hour-long episode on, the ills of racism in football, I think we're going to leave international football there for now. Was there anything else we wanted to cover there? I think we're all excited for the return of domestic football, right?
Pretty
much.
Yeah, we don't have to think about it again, guys. We just don't have to think about it for a good while. Domestic football's back, and it's back right after this break. And we are back, and so is domestic football. Finally, let's do it. And we are doing our first, or one of the first, mailbags, where we've had some viewers and listeners send in their questions to give us stuff to talk about. So we are eternally grateful to all of you that got in touch. And we're going to start with a question from Rosa from Blue Sky, guys. We're on Blue Sky. Go find us. It's the future. And it says, will Roma actually improve under Ranieri? Now, this is, of course, the big story since the international break broke out. Juric was, of course, sacked. It looked like it was going to be Montella for a while. It looked like it was going to be Mancini. But Big Claudio has come back for one last dance to take over his boyhood team and try and stabilize the ship there. Now, before we get into how he'll actually do as a manager, what I like about this deal is that it's until the end of the season, then he takes a step upstairs and he's kind of a director of football advisor kind of role, helping them find the next person. I think this kind of makes sense. The Friedkins know they don't know much about football. They want to have people who do know about football. So for me, I want to get off the top. I think that is a good aspect of this move, right? That they're clearly future planning. But the question was, will Roma improve under Ranieri? Andrea, I'm going to go to you first. They can't get much worse, so they have to improve, right?
I think they will, only to the case that they will actually be harder to beat. I think Ranieri will have he's very good at having a plan, a system, being hard to beat, being very, very well coached. So in that aspect, we should see a much better coach team, because right now we've been seeing like a team running around with headless chickens pretty much. So that's the issue right now. So I think he will solve that. But what it does do as well is that it does give the fans that kind of like understanding that this season now is a write-off. Let's be honest. You're not gone for the manager that's going to be long-term. So it's more now, look, we've got someone who's a big fan, nostalgia, it's going to kind of get the fans back on side, that they've got someone positive. But they do know deep down it's not going to drastically change their fortunes. But he will implement that at least. He will implement, a good structure, and he'll stick to, a certain 11 that he'll figure out as well. And they've got some good players to work with still. Like I said, it's not like they're terrible either. Like they've got a terrible squad. Like they've got some good players in that they can really go on. But I think at this point, it's just more about making it more respectable and just see how the season kind of finishes. Maybe try to challenge for a Coppa Italia, who knows? And that's kind of the way it's got to go. And I think that's all they can really ask for. But certainly in that aspect, yes, I do think they would improve. And I think that side of things is the most important thing, that they will look way more coached. They will look like they're an actual team on the field. And I think that's crucial, because that's, severely lacking these weeks. So that's the main thing that will improve for sure.
Yeah, nice. And Adam, we should see like a change in system and him actually play those players in their positions, right? Like I think we'll kind of see them go back to a back four now, I imagine, under Ranieri. And it'll be a bit more suited to the players. Maybe, the players like Celik and Zalewski, who are getting quite exposed on the wings, won't be so exposed. Like, do you expect him to kind of change things up drastically? I think there'll be a big shift, but it'll be much more just stable and steady, right?
I mean, there's a clue to his nickname, right? He is the Tinkerman, so he will play around with things. I think he will initially make it harder to beat, as Andrea kind of alluded to. I think he'll shore it up. And look, I think if you look at broadly the tactics he deployed at Calgary as a good example of that, he made them hard to beat. There wasn't many thrashings from that point of view. And if you look at the way that he deployed their tactics, it was very much a 3-4-3 or a 4-5-1, which is kind of adaptable, I suppose, in very many ways to the way that De Rossi was playing with Roma at times. I think it doesn't solve the issues that we kind of established at the very beginning of the season, where it was basically a lack of creativity. I think that there is still going to be those issues going into the next window. But certainly, as Andrea alluded to, he will get them drilled. He will make sure that they're coached and that they're kind of versed in terms of scenarios and what to do in certain ways. And Ranieri, I think, alluded to it in the press conference. He's talking to the likes of Totti, for example. He's talking to De Rossi. He's embracing everyone. He doesn't see this as just him as being part of the solution. He sees this as everyone gets involved, and he's not going to shy away from making the calls as well. He alluded to the fact that if there's clauses in the contracts, then he doesn't care about that. He's going to play whoever is the best players, and if that includes Dybala, if that includes certain players that have been omitted from the squad, like Hummels, for example, is another example of Roma fans just wondering when the hell this guy is actually going to play. Then this is the thing that essentially Ranieri said, you bought me to make these decisions. If you don't want me to do that, then I'll just leave, essentially. And I think I like that bravery. But it needed someone like Ranieri to come in because this is the last chance for Friedkins, as far as I can see this. What worries me is that they've had to use a consultancy group to kind of come to this decision, which seems very strange. And I suppose you just worry about the future of Roma because it's quite clear that the Friedkins don't really care as much, perhaps, about Roma going forward. And given their investment into Everton, I suppose it's a question of when they'll transition away from the Friedkin group. But look, if we establish what Roma are going to do, as Andrea alluded to, I think survival and just being in the league is going to be critical. I think it'll be very interesting to see who Ranieri kind of suggests is the next candidate to replace him and what kind of steps he's going to do in that transitional phase as well. So, it's never a dull moment in Serie A, that's for sure.
No, well, absolutely. I'm kind of excited to see if Ranieri can get the best out of Dovbyk and what we can see out of Sule, because I feel like with those two attacking players, I can see him kind of having those as two focal points up front, or maybe Sule playing off Dovbyk and kind of having that Sule a little bit wider and getting the balls into Dovbyk. So I feel like Ranieri with a big number 9 is quite an exciting prospect. So I think it'll be really interesting to see if he can get the most out of Dovbyk, and we'll see. I think we'll see marked improvements in quite a few players' performances in general. I think maybe a player like Pellegrini might have the weight lifted off his shoulders a little bit, and we might see him start to improve. So yeah, I'm excited to see which players will thrive under him, because you have to also remember how big a figure in Serie A or in Italian football Ranieri is. Like, the level of respect for the man in this country is through the roof. And I think a lot of players, him coming in, they'll just be like, oh, okay, we've got Claudio, everything's fine. I'll run through a wall for him. He's a lovely man. Like, I think we will see at least an improvement in the mood and performances. So yeah, I think as much as it's not the most exciting thing for Roma fans, it's more exciting than Juric continuing and whatever the season has been so far. So thank you for your question, Rosa. The next one, Andrea, I think I'm going to let you answer this, but I'm going to give you a time limit. No, I'm joking. This is from Better Red Than Dead, again on Blue Sky. We were talking about the title challenge, talking about, which teams can stick around, which teams are going to drop off. Well, this question is, how long can Viola stick around at the top? We were kind of joking about it last lesson, I'm still in work mode. Last episode. But how long? There's still a bit of legs in La Viola, right?
Yeah, I think the question kind of sums it up. It's got to stop at some point. So this is the question's literally for me to say that. No, but I think so as well. I think looking at a neutral perspective, I think as we was alluding to last week, it's the attacking third where I still think Fiorentina lack a lot of quality to kind of come in when players like Goodmanson are out. If Keane goes out for a bit, these type of players will be massive blows, and I think that would cause concern. We've seen players like Kwame come in who have really done nothing, have been really poor. Mm-hmm. So that would be the concern. So I think overall that's the big kind of worry while it will go down. But I also think as well the Europe thing as well, depending how far they go in that might also have effects, having to rotate the squad a bit more again. So, but I certainly think I still think a little while. I don't think it's going to end straight away. I still think we might get to Christmas and still have a similar pattern of results. But I think, as we kind of go into January, February, we might see kind of other teams kind of stepping up their game and then kind of seeing the table kind of shape a bit more. But at the end of the day, we asked for two things. We asked for exciting football and a new team of like new exciting players, and we've got both. So I can't ask for more at the moment. We knew this season was going to be a rebuild anyway, so anything really was a bonus. So we take it day by day. But yeah, I think it won't last for that long. But um, they're in the right direction. Yeah,
at least
they're in the right direction at least. That's the main
absolutely
thing.
love that. And Andrea, just a side note, we had a market in my Fantacalcio, and I picked up Camuzzo today. So he is now officially added to my defence.
Great.
I was absolutely delighted with that. I want to tell you that. But Adam, I'm going to leave you with the second question that Better Red Than Dead offered us, and it's, can Genoa survive the drop? This is one that we've written them off and then pulled them back in again and written them off. How do you see this one going? They're starting to, I don't know, like... the strikers doing better than Pinamonti's doing better than we anticipated.
Yeah.
Do you think there's still hope for them?
I think a lot of it depends on the stability off the pitch, doesn't it? I think a lot of it depends on what do they need to do in January. It's been such a hard task for Gilardino. I think prior to this, at the beginning of the season, I thought they would struggle, but would have enough within the squad and the ranks, and the way that Gilardino had kind of got them drilled. I thought they had enough within them. I think what's fortunate for Genoa is the fact that they're not necessarily the worst side at the moment. The likes of Monza, for example, the likes of Hellas, for example, that like to concede goals. But, Venezia as well, they've started to be a bit more solid, but they've not been particularly brilliant either at the same time. So I think there's factors, and I think there's teams like potentially like Parma being dragged into it. I think it's just come to knowledge that Boni, the striker that we all rate on this podcast, is potentially signed an agreement with Napoli. It's just about the teams agreeing a fee going forward. So, that could potentially harm Parma's credentials of staying up in the league. Hopefully not, because they've been so exciting up until recently with their form. But I think there's a lot of clubs that could be dragged into it, Rory. It's just going to be a question of what happens off the pitch and what happens in terms of transfer dealings in January. They obviously got Mario Balotelli as well. He hasn't done much, but I think he's still trying to get his fitness at this moment in time. So I will put my neck on the line and say I think Genoa will do enough subject to what they do in January.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. That Boni deal wouldn't be him joining in January, though, would it? He'd see the season out, right?
I don't know. I would assume that it could be as a backup to Lukaku, though, as a potential. So that might open opportunity for Simeone to maybe move on. We shall see, though.
Because if I'm Palmer, I'm saying, yeah, you can have him, but you can have him at the end of the season. Like, we want a loan back. Like, can we at least keep him till the end of the season, please? Like, but that's incredible business from Napoli, because it was only mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and then it was like, oh, Napoli, you're interested? Bang, done. Like, I like that kind of incisive action. Because, yeah, Bonnie's been very, very exciting. Got one of our goals of the season so far. You can check out that thread on our social media. But the last question for Serie A has come from friend of the show, Stephen Cole, and he's asking for our Serie A signing of the season so far and flop of the season so far. He's offered his flop so far. He said Douglas Luiz or Emerson Royale. He said for signing of the season, he said David De Gea. Andrea, how do you feel about that as a shout?
That's a great shout, actually. I personally would say not to. I think David Hayes. I didn't think of it, but David Hayes probably would be up there. I personally, only one I would say. The thing is, I would be biased to say Moise Kean just for what he's done, but I actually have to go. I have to give it to Retegui for Atalanta, due to the circumstance. Their main striker gets injured. It's panic mode, and they just sorted it out quickly, got him in. And bear in mind as well, Retegui was, scoring a few goals here and there for Italy. In Genoa, he didn't get many. Didn't look the greatest. And now Atalanta have turned him into this superstar striker. So I think that has to have a lot of say in being a top signing. I know there's lots of others, but I think just for the circumstance sake of it, I think that's been a really top signing this season.
Nice. No, I like that. I like that. I'm going to put forward Scott McTominay because I think it has to be put forward that Scott McTominay has had an instant impact in that team, created an incredible role for himself within that side as well. Completely like, he has his own specific role in that team. So I think I have to put forward Scott McTominay. But Adam, are there any players that come to mind for you before we get to the flops of your signing of the season so far?
Yeah, I'm just going to be different because I do agree with the sentiments already, but I will go with Chico Conceição. I think he's been a breath of fresh air from a Juventus perspective,
I like that.
offering a different dynamic to their squad. Certainly, I think a lot of people weren't too sure about what he would bring to this Juventus side, and I think he's done really well. Added a different dimension and working quite well with Motta, so I think as a potential site, I appreciate it's only a loan with the obligation to sign, but I think the business in terms of the financials look really favourable at this moment for Juventus. So I'd say that one.
Nice. I really like that shout. That's a very good shout. For flop, I think Douglas Luiz and Emerson Royale are both very good shouts. But I think I'm going to go for Lefebvre at Roma. There was a lot of hype around him when he came. Now, he's had injuries, and obviously the club's been a basket case. But I just expected a little bit more, and I expected to see a bit more of quality when he has come on. I've just been really disappointed, and there was a lot of hype when he came into the league. So I think for me, that would be my flop so far. But Andrea, I'm going to go for you. And why is it Emerson Royale? Because he's been absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I think that's the obvious one. I think it's quite harsh to give a Roma player just because they're all doing terrible. But for me, it has to be Dovic. I just think for all that, the money they paid and the goals he scored last season, he's been terrible. But again, it's not. I don't think it's his fault. I still think he's a great player, and maybe with Ranieri you could turn it around. But I just think for the price and the promise, they've got hardly any kind of return on it. So I'll kind of look at that aspect of things. If you're paying that much money for it, and it's flopped that much, I think that has to be considered one of the top ones.
No, absolutely fair. Adam?
Again, I'll try and be different. I will go for Pograncic, who Fiorentina signed from Lecce. I think a lot was expected of him. His debut against Parma was tragic. It was awful. He hasn't really proved much since that kind of move. I was expecting more at this stage of the season, and I appreciate it's on the smaller potential transfer funds in comparison to the fees that were involved with Douglas Luiz, for example, Emerson Royale, but disappointed is fair to say. I think I was expecting more, so yeah, I'll go with that.
That's a very good shout. Yeah, we were kind of talking about that deal a lot at the beginning of the season, weren't we? And then just a very quick question to wrap up the Serie A part before we do a very quick Premier League bit. Which will be closer, the title race or the relegation battle? Adam, which one do you think is going to be closer? They're both going to be pretty tight. And the last couple of seasons, we've had some very close relegation battles.
Yeah, I always find with Serie A, the bottom half is always tight. It's always kind of separated by only a couple of points. We saw it for the last 2 to 3 seasons. But I don't think we've necessarily seen a title race as open as we have at this stage of the season. Normally we've only had like 3 or 4 teams grouped together. When you look at it, there's arguably 6 or 7 that could potentially do it. I think by the end of it, it will still remain to be the relegation battle, personally. But I would say, looking at the way, the games are kind of piling up and, Europe, you've still got the Coppa Italia to play a part, I think the top half is going to be more fascinating than it's ever been for the past 5 seasons. So I'm going to say title race.
Nice. Andrea, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I have to agree. Title race. I think, as Adam said, it's so open. Could be even 3 or 4 teams can be pushing for that. But I think with the bottom half, I do agree with Adam. Like in recent years, it's been so tight. But I just think there's a couple teams for me who look dead on to get to be in that bottom 2, at least 2 of them, and maybe the third one might be a bit more playable in terms of who might get it. But I think it's a bit more concrete who's going to kind of drop down. I think we'll see a clearer picture in the next 5 to 10 games. So I don't think it'll be that long till we see a clear picture of it. So just for that reason, I would have to say the title race will be a lot closer.
No, I think I agree with everyone. Not to be boring, but I think I agree with everyone. I think the title race is going to go down to the wire, and I think, like we've said, there are some teams that do just look destined at this point. So, but either way, there's going to be drama at both ends right until the end of the season. I'm absolutely certain about that because Serie A never disappoints. And then we had one little Premier League question. Again, by Stephen Cole. Thank you for your question. And it was, of course, Arsenal related. He's an Arsenal fan. We talk about Arsenal. Arsenal regretting getting rid of Smith Rowe. Personally, should have given him more game time. I'm going to very quickly just answer this, if you guys don't mind. I'm just going to very quickly do this. I think I've said it on last episodes. I got it right this time. I'm personally just happy for him to do really well at Fulham and seeing him score goals and like enjoying himself. I think if he'd have stayed at Arsenal, he would have had limited game time. He would have played maybe 60, 70 minutes by this point in the season. His career would have stilted more, and maybe we would have used him when Odegaard got injured, but I think it would have been a waste of his time and ours, unfortunately. I'm just delighted he's doing well elsewhere and that he can progress and hopefully get himself back into the England squad at some point, because I think he's definitely good enough. So, yeah, it would have been nice to have him, but it would have been selfish for us to keep him, I think. So I'm delighted for him to go off and do well. But, guys, that is all of our questions this week. Thank you again for sending in your questions. And we will be back with the domestic football, which is back this weekend. So, guys, is there anything to say before we need to go?
Just to say we're on Blue Sky, as you've already alluded to, and great to have the famous Stan Collymore follow us on there. So many congrats if you're still listening to us, Stan Collymore, at this point of the podcast. A lot of gratitude for what you've been doing for us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just have to very quickly say, he put us on a starter list, a starter pack thing on Blue Sky for like football accounts to follow. And I'll tell you what, my phone was going off a lot this weekend as all the notifications. So thank you. If you're new to the pod, if you're a new follower, you found us on Blue Sky, stick with us. I promise it gets better. But we're delighted to have you on board. So yeah, you can find us on Blue Sky now at the Anglo-Italian pod. Personally, and it's kind of a bit of an executive decision, but if things continue the way they do on Twitter, I think I might just delete the account there and we will be on Blue Sky. So it's something we'll keep you up to date with. But you can find us on TikTok at the Anglo-Italian pod, on Instagram at the Anglo-Italian pod, on X if you want to, at Italian Anglo pod. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button somewhere down here. And on your podcast app of choice, give us a subscribe and a follow and a rating and all those things. Andrea, where can our listeners and viewers find you?
You can find me on TikTok and YouTube at Calciofiore on those main accounts. Maybe I need to get Blue Sky as well now after hearing that.
Well, it's possible. And I just need to say, between you, me, and the listeners, there may be two Serie A clubs who at some point need to ask someone for their handles for Blue Sky. But we will keep you up to date with that and how that progresses and who they are as it goes on. Adam, anything to say before we go?
No, keep up the good work in supporting our pod and keep on the lowdown on our socials.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next time. Ciao, a dopo.
Ciao, ciao.